When the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth?
Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief.
May our testimonies be as deep and as strong as that of Jacob, who, when confronted by one who sought to destroy his faith, declared, I could not be shaken.
Hello, my friends, all you wonderful Unshaken Saints out there. I'm Jared Halverson, and I hope you are ready to run this week because we've got some miles to cover. Now, can you go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds flat? Because we got to rev the engines and hit pedal to the metal. We are covering John chapter 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 all in 1 week. And these chapters are essential. They're glorious. So we have work ahead of us, but sweet is the work, okay? Now, the fact it's all in the book of John should perk up our ears as well. Well, the last couple of weeks, we've been spending our time mostly with Matthew and with Luke, with some help from Mark now and then. I love the Synoptic Gospels, but there is something different about John. And primarily, it's his high Christology that moves me. Christology, as you recall, is the study of Christ. What kind of a being is he? And if there's high Christology, then there must be low Christology too. And there is, because he's both high and low. He's the ultimate proving of contraries. He is divinity and humanity. He is the Son of God and the Son of Mary. He is infinite and intimate, ineffable and yet approachable. How does he do all of that? Well, in the depictions of Jesus in the Gospels, it's often more of the mortal side of Jesus and his humanity and his approachability. In the book of John, he assumes you already know that side. In fact, if John was written for church members who had already read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they know the stories of Jesus, they understand his teachings, great. But do you know who he really is? Do you know Jesus enough that you'll stand in awe of him, that the Word was made flesh, that he came among us and lived in such a way that he could bring us home? I love the depiction of Jesus in John, and I love his depiction in the chapters we'll study this week. They are mind-blowing. If you remember the four beasts of the book of Revelation and how they line up with each of the four gospel writers, remember which one was John's? The eagle. And his depiction of Jesus absolutely soars. So spread your wings and get ready to fly. Specifically, get ready to see the Father in the words of the Son. Never will Jesus talk more about the Father up to this point than what we'll see today. And over and over and over, he refers to the Father as the one who sent him. And I'm only here because I'm here to reflect the Father and his love. As Elder Holland once said, yes, Jesus came to earth to improve God's view of humanity. That's what the atonement was for, kind of clean us up before he presents us. But also he came to improve humanity's view of God, to let us know that our Father in heaven is a God of love, who so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And if we've seen a loving Christ, we know what the Father is like because he's just as loving. He's approachable. And that ought to be awe-inspiring to us all. That is one thing to keep an eye on as we study these chapters this week. The other thing, because Jesus is so bold to present the Father and present himself as the Son of the Father, it also leads to an intensifying persecution and opposition against him. So keep an eye out for that as well, especially when we start in chapter 7 and then move on in chapter 8. Chapter 7 is so oppositional, and it'll go back and forth between Jesus and those that oppose him, and confusion surrounding his identity, and what do people think about him? Who do they think he is? That's going to be John 7. In John 8, we're going to see Jesus talk with the woman taken in adultery. And speaking of proving contraries, he's going to balance justice and mercy perfectly. And then he's going to face all kinds of more opposition from those that cannot stand the thought of him actually being the Messiah. Chapter 9, then, we'll see Jesus and the man born blind. And his understanding of Jesus, again, against a lot of opposition, is one of my favorites. He's one of my favorite characters in all of Scripture. I wish I knew his name. And then finally, chapter 10, we'll see Jesus as the Good Shepherd including of lost sheep and other sheep that are not of that Jewish fold. But even that will see opposition, because wherever there are shepherds with sheep, there are also wolves trying to pick off the weak and the wounded from the edge of the flock. Opposition is going to describe a lot of what we see, and I hope we're ready not only to understand it, but to face it ourselves if we are truly to embrace Jesus for who he truly is. These chapters will be a test of our own discipleship, to see if we are willing to stand and be counted among the courageous Christians who know who Jesus really is. Well, let's let him introduce himself to us. Okay, John chapter 7, verse 1, after these things, what are these things? Well, this is John 7. What just happened in John 6? The bread of life discourse. Talk about opposition. We saw rejection of Jesus, right? I'm not the Messiah that you expect me to be. And these are hard sayings, who can hear them? And so they don't follow them anymore. That's what just happened in the previous chapter when we turned the page to chapter 7. After all of that, Jesus walked in Galilee. That's where the multiplication of the loaves and fishes took place. That's where he shared this bread of life discourse. But why else is he up there in Galilee? For he would not walk in Jewry. And that's just the King James translator's strange way of saying Judea. Judea is the southern part of the kingdom, where the capital city of Jerusalem is. That's kind of home territory for the Jews. But then up north is where the Sea of Galilee is. And so the Galilee area, it's almost like rural Jesus versus urban Jesus. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke talk more about the rural side of things, that his Galilean ministry. Whereas John will focus more on the urban ministry, the Jerusalem, Judea ministry. Now, this chapter begins, though, in Galilee, not in Judea, and here's why. Because the Jews sought to kill him. Ooh, okay, that clarifies things right off the bat. From the very first verse in this chapter, you know what they're after. They are after blood, and they want to kill Jesus. Now, that shouldn't surprise us. We've seen him hinting at that already. And not even hinting, being much more bold as he tells his apostles, we're going to go to Jerusalem, I'm going to be betrayed, I'm going to suffer, I'm going to be crucified, and I'm going to rise again the third day. Now, they had no understanding what rising again the third day meant, but they knew what crucifixion was. They knew what death entailed. Remember Peter, be this far from thee, I'm not going to let it happen, and then get thee behind me, Satan. Remember Mount of Transfiguration when Moses and Elias talk about the decease that Jesus would accomplish in Jerusalem? Remember Jesus setting his face steadfastly to go to Jerusalem, even to the point of passing through Samaritan territory to take a shortcut? Jesus knows what they're going to do, but he knows that he has to face it. That was his mission. That's what his Father sent him to do. So we're in an interesting place here at the beginning of John chapter 7. He shouldn't go to Jerusalem, but he's got to go to Jerusalem. But he can't go to Jerusalem. They're going to kill him. But that's why he's been sent to earth. Okay, Jesus is between a rock and a hard place. What's he going to do? Now, if verse 1 tells us the where of this story, verse 2 is going to tell us the when. And it says that now the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles was at hand. Now, the Feast of Tabernacles was a fall feast because it was the fall harvest. It was also called the Feast of Ingathering because they're gathering in their crops. Glorious time. We have a full pantry. We're going to make it through the winter. And so this was the most celebratory of all the Jewish festivals because, again, there's lots of food on the table. Picture Thanksgiving feast, okay? And what it commemorates, well, put it this way, this is one of the 3 pilgrimage feasts where good practicing Jews from all around the diaspora are supposed to gather in Jerusalem to celebrate and to worship together. And like I said, celebrate describes the Feast of Tabernacles to a T. Now, we've already seen the feast, we saw the Feast of Unleavened Bread / Passover. That commemorates the freedom from Egyptian bondage, the Exodus. But then that's followed by 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. That sounds rough, except for the fact that God provided for their every need. Sound like harvest time? Sound like God taking care of you even in your wilderness wanderings? That is the Feast of Tabernacles and what it commemorates. After all, a tabernacle is a tent, and the Lord himself stayed in a tabernacle in the wilderness, the tent of testimony. Meanwhile, surrounding that tent were tents among the tribes of Israel. They had shelter and covering as well. And so to commemorate the fact that God provided for them and sheltered them all those 40 years, well, let's act it out every year. Let's celebrate it. Let's commemorate it. If we were to act it out ourselves, go pitch a tent in the backyard and go sleep out there and remember what it was like to camp for 40 years. We thought Trek was rough. Well, that's what's happening at this time of year. We'll see later another feast during the winter. So things are getting colder temperature-wise, even as the opposition of the Jews is beginning to heat up. This is the last fall and winter of the Savior's life. And come next spring, we will see Gethsemane and Calvary and an empty tomb. Easter awaits, but for now, we're in the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, it's going to be dangerous to go to Jerusalem, but that's what we're all supposed to do. We're supposed to gather to Jerusalem for part of this pilgrimage feast. Well, what's Jesus going to do? Well, his own brothers are wondering about that. And in verse 3, we meet these brethren. And this is not metaphorical. This is not Quorum of the 12. This is literal, his half-brothers. Okay? Now, his brethren therefore said unto him, Depart hence and go into Judea. I mean, this is pilgrimage feast. We all got to head south. But notice their reasoning. It wasn't just to go commemorate the wilderness wanderings. They said, that thy disciples also may see the works that thou doest. I mean, all these incredible miracles have been taking place up here in the north, near where we all grew up in Nazareth, surrounding the Sea of Galilee. Everyone up here knows who you are. But what's here? You're like a rural celebrity. That's almost an oxymoron. Who cares about that? Go down south. Go to Jerusalem. I mean, if you can make it there, you'll make it anywhere, okay? So let your disciples there see the works that thou doest. For there is no man that doeth anything in secret, and he himself seeketh to be known openly. I mean, you don't want to be the messianic secret. No, that's come and gone. The world needs to know who you are. So do it in Jerusalem where everyone can see. They say, if thou do these things, show thyself to the world. Now, if it stopped there, this sounds pretty supportive. Like, come on, Jesus, we know who you are. And the people around Galilee have seen that you're the Messiah. I mean, because nobody can do the works that you do other than the Messiah. But the people in Jerusalem don't quite get it. So go down south and show the world. Now, so far so good, but notice verse 5. And this changes everything. For neither did his brethren believe in him. Oh, so we just got the emoji. And it was a winking one, or an LOL, laugh out loud. These were words of skepticism. This was a mocking tone. There was sarcasm there. These half-brothers are not even half convinced that Jesus is the Christ. We saw that no man is prophet in his own country. Well, imagine prophet in your own family. No, they're too close to the action. They think they know Jesus, and it's all mortality and no divinity. High Christology, forget about it. It's neither high nor is it Christ. And they're making fun of him. You're the village marvel, big brother. And so if you really are the Messiah, then yeah, go to your capital city, O thou King of the Jews. Can you picture them bowing in mock adoration? We've seen hints of this skepticism already. And some of that will change when his brother James, for example, ends up being converted to the point of writing the book of James. Oh, there's going to be some growing up in God for them, these brothers of the Son of God themselves. But at this point, they still don't get it. At this point, they're more like a different brother, namely Lucifer. Remember what Lucifer does at the Mount of Temptation? Go to Jerusalem and throw yourself off the temple so everyone can see who you are. I mean, the angels will come swooping in so you don't dash your foot against the stone. And the world will know. All publicity is good publicity, right? And so if you're going to be the Messiah, you might as well make the boldest declaration of that with obvious proof. In a way, these half-brothers of Jesus are doing just the same thing. Go to Jerusalem and make a public display of your messianic power. Oh, no need to leap off the temple. Just go to the temple and perform the incredible works you've been doing here around the Sea of Galilee. And the world will know who you are. Go seek that honor openly. But Jesus will have none of that. In verse 6 through 9, Jesus said unto them, My time is not yet come, but your time is always ready. The world cannot hate you, but me it hateth, because I testify of it, that the works thereof are evil. So go ye up unto the feast. I go not up yet unto this feast, for my time is not yet full come. And when he had said these words unto them, he abode still in Galilee. Oh, it's interesting to see Jesus push back against these brothers. After all, they're pushing hard against him. And what is he saying to them? Easy for you to say, go to Jerusalem, because you can go there and be accepted. If I go there, I'll be killed. And why? Because I oppose the wicked world. No wonder the wicked world opposes me. It's easy to get along with the world, as long as you don't say anything against it. But to speak truth to power, like our cousin John did, yes, it cost him his life, and it's going to cost me mine. You, the world, cannot hate, because you love the world too much. So much, in fact, that you've become worldly. That's our danger. The world is too much with us. It's so enamoring. It's pretty amazing what the world can do. And especially in a world that does not want to be called out for its wickedness, well, how dare we even try? And sometimes we lack the courage and the conviction to call out a wicked world for its wickedness. Jesus lacked neither that courage nor that conviction. He's asking us to be more like him. I'll give you one poster boy for somebody who did it right, and that's Dietrich Bonhoeffer. This was a German Christian minister during World War II who had the courage and conviction to stand up to Hitler in the Third Reich, and they killed him for it. But before they did, he said this, and how's this for writing on the wall? From Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Jesus Christ lived in the midst of his enemies. And we see that clearly here in John chapter 7. At the end, all his disciples deserted him. On the cross, he was utterly alone, surrounded by evildoers and mockers. For this cause he had come, to bring peace to the enemies of God. So the Christian, too, belongs not in the seclusion of a cloistered life, but in the thick of foes. There is his commission, his work. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer backed that up with his own life. He did not seek the seclusion of a cloistered life. He didn't even seek the safety of an escape from Germany. He stayed right there in the thick of foes because of his testimony of Jesus. We have to be more brave. We have to be willing to come out of camouflage, as Elder Cook has challenged us. We have to let the world know that we know who Jesus is. We can do it kindly and lovingly, but we need to do it courageously, as Jesus does. Now, verse 10, when his brethren were gone up, so they go ahead just as he had suggested. But then notice what Jesus does. Then went he also up unto the feast, not openly, but as it were in secret, which is amazing to me. Despite the danger, Jesus is still going to go to Jerusalem. This is a pilgrimage feast after all, and he's a good practicing Jew. In fact, more than that, he's the king of the Jews, and he's going to go to his capital city. More than that, he's the God of Israel, and he's going there where the worship takes place. But notice what's happening there in Jerusalem as Jesus is making the trip. Then the Jews sought him at the feast and said, where is he? I mean, you think about it. Jesus is the most famous Jew there is, right? And yeah, he usually spends his time up in Galilee, but he's come down to Jerusalem now and then, and rumors are swirling, news is spreading, and everybody wants to know. I mean, if you're going to see anybody, Jerusalem's the place to see him. And where's Jesus? You hear the whispers and kind of down the alleys and people looking around corners. And anytime a crowd gathers, is Jesus in the midst? They want to see him, but they don't know where he is. Makes you wonder, why are they seeking him? Is it mere curiosity to see a celebrity come into town? Is it sign seeking? Oh, we want him to do the miracles he's done up north. Or is it testimony? Do they know who he is and just want to come unto him? You see, there was much murmuring among the people concerning him. They just didn't know what to make of him. And murmuring is the right word. I looked it up in the Greek. And yes, it's muttering, it's grumbling, it's complaining. Who is this guy? Now, some said, he is a good man. Talk about an understatement. Others said, nay, but he deceiveth the people. A good man wouldn't make these kinds of claims. Wouldn't claim to be the Messiah if he isn't one. Wouldn't claim to be the Son of God, because that's blasphemy. And we'll see some more evidence of that this week. Which is he, though? You remember Matthew 16? Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Well, they're wondering. They all seem to have their opinions. But will they voice them? Well, no. Verse 13, howbeit no man spake openly of him for fear of the Jews. They are so afraid of what other people will think. Remember Jesus' words about John the Baptist? He was not a reed shaken in the wind. Well, all of these people are shaking in the wind. And which way are the winds of public opinion supposed to blow? Am I supposed to agree that Jesus is a good man? Am I supposed to believe he's the Messiah? Am I supposed to condemn him as a deceiver? I don't know. You tell me, what am I supposed to believe? No, what do you believe independently? It's interesting to see people that are afraid to speak up for what they know or what they believe for fear of whomever. The phrase cancel culture didn't exist when I was young. I'd never heard of it, but I think we've all heard of it now. And the fear of saying something that is then going to cancel you. And you can't say that. I've heard it said that you can tell who's in charge by who strikes fear into you. And who are you not allowed to speak against? Ooh, there's some power there. There's some control. I'm not saying that we need to speak harmfully or in an unchristlike way. But I am saying we speak the truth in love, which, yes, involves love, but also involves truth. And being willing to be counted as a true Christian, defending the doctrine of Christ. Well, the people aren't there yet. They're wondering, they're confused, they're afraid. There's a lot of emotion in John chapter 7, and we'll see some of it break forth in just a moment. Now, verse 14. Now, about the midst of the feast. So it's been time for everybody to come into town. The revelry is continuing, and it's the middle of this whole week's worth of celebrations. About the middle of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and taught. So he's no longer trying to stay in secret, okay? Because the temple is where all eyes are. And Jesus is going to go right there. And the Jews marveled. Now, what are they marveling about? We're going to see a few reasons for that. Part of it is his own courage to come at all. And we saw back in verse 1, they're going to kill him here. And yet he comes. Yeah, that's marvelous. And yet what are they marveling about in this verse? They marveled, saying, how knoweth this man letters? Have he never learned? You get an echo there of the 12-year-old Jesus at the same spot. There's some deja vu. As people, doctors of the law, lawyers and scribes who know everything chapter and verse, are asking him questions, and he's answering them in ways they'd never considered. They're blown away. Where's this kid learned all this? Well, he's no longer a child, but they're still amazed that, who was your rabbi? Who did you study under? Surely there was some master of the law that taught you, since you know so much. And yet, who was Jesus' rabbi? Who had he learned these things from? He'd learned them from his Father. And that's what amazes me about his response, okay? Jesus answered them and said, my doctrine is not mine. I didn't make this stuff up. It's not coming from me. It's not mine, but his that sent me. So here we see this first glimpse of him pointing them upward to the Father. And he'll do that over and over and over throughout this week's material. So the doctrine isn't mine, it's God's. And then this all-important verse, John 17:7, if any man will do his will, God's will that is, as taught and personified by me, then he shall know of the doctrine, whether it be of God or whether I speak of myself. After all, you're wondering, who's this coming from? Am I just making this up as I go? Or is this truth? Remember early on in the book of Mark when they were blown away by Jesus' teachings and they said, man, this guy speaks as one having authority, not as the scribes. Scribes are Bible bashers. Scribes know quote chapter and verse. Scribes can point down to the page. They're a scribal, written focus. And that's where you get the authority, from the Word. And yet Jesus was the Word made flesh, and he doesn't have to quote chapter and verse. He's the one that gave those chapters and verses in the first place. He doesn't have to quote himself. He can just be himself and speak. He speaks as one having authority. And that was so odd for this scribal religion. Well, here, again, there's this sense of where'd you learn all this stuff? I mean, you don't have an education. He's like, oh, there's more than one way to get an education. And I don't try to show off my book smarts, though I know the book. I helped write it. But to me, it's more about street smarts here. It's more about action and putting into practice the things that I'm teaching. Because if you'll do that, if you put some skin in the game, if you'll experiment upon the Word, as my friend Alma said, then you'll come to know for yourself that it's true. Because you know what? You can usually tell when you're living a lie. Can you tell when you're living the truth? The Spirit will come and confirm it. Your joy in seeing the results of this kind of lifestyle will come as confirmation. Just try it. Put it into practice, and you'll be amazed. We talk about orthodoxy, and doxy is where the doctrine comes in. Orthopraxy is where practice comes in. And will you practice the life of Christ? Will you live the gospel of Jesus Christ? Because if you will, you'll come to know that it had an inspired source. When Abraham says that he knew there was greater happiness and peace and rest for him, how did he know? He wanted to live according to those lessons he'd received from the fathers. Act on it. Live these things. I call this a pragmatist epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. How do we know what we know? And for most people, it's a rationalist epistemology. You need proof, and there's a scientific empiricism, and this is the evidence that it's all real. Okay, that's one approach. But I love the Lord's approach here. Just live it. There's a practicality to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Do I need to explain the law of tithing, or can I just invite you to live it and then watch what God does with your 90%? Do I have to hire a dietitian to explain the value of the word of wisdom? Or just live it and watch yourself run and not be weary and walk and not faint. Live the Christian life and you'll end up being convinced of Christianity. That's what Jesus is getting at here. It reminds me of what Alma says, is not this real? Not just is not this true. Of course it was true. But more than that, it was real. Real life. Go live it. With all of its messiness and its challenges and trials, its sins and sorrows, through it all, just lay hold on the gospel of Jesus Christ and live it as best as you can. And the proof is in the pudding. Taste it. Experience it. I cannot explain it unless you try. So try. Now in that verse, Jesus has begun mentioning the Father. It's not my doctrine, it's his. Okay? He'll prove that to you. Live it. And he's going to keep that focus on the Father in a lot of the verses that we'll see throughout the rest of chapter 7. And again, these are fighting words, and there's a lot of fighting going on who is this Jesus, and do I trust him, and what do I think of him, and so on. But notice his focus on the Father. Verse 18, he that speaketh of himself seeketh his own glory. And that's not what Jesus is doing. I'm not talking about myself. I'm not saying it's my doctrine. I'm not trying to shine the spotlight on me. No, I'm seeking the Father's glory instead of my own. And that's what he gets at here. He that seeketh his glory that sent him, the Father's glory that is, the same is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. It describes Jesus to a T. He is the truth. He is righteousness. But he's also the Son of righteousness, and he's pointing to the righteousness of God. I'm doing this for his glory, not my own. I hope we can say the same thing. That everything we do is not to seek our own glory, but to seek the glory of God, he who sent us. Now, in verse 19, Jesus is then going to get down to business, okay? And it's pretty stark. He says, did not Moses give you the law, and yet none of you keepeth the law? Why go you about to kill me? Wait, what did you just say? He's just calling them out so clearly. Why are you trying to kill me? And the people answered and said, that's the devil. Who goeth about to kill thee? So they're denying it from the very start. Like, that's serious business. That's a major accusation. Nobody's trying to kill you. What are you talking about? Well, just wait and see. But he's getting that out into the open. He's calling it out because he's come out of the shadows. It's not his time yet, but the day is fast approaching. And he knows what they're plotting. And so to call it out in front of the multitudes, this is now going to be a public issue. And people will wonder. They're going to have to decide. Now, notice he brought up Moses and the law, and then condemns them for not keeping it, which is poetic justice, since that's what they always do to him. Condemn him for not keeping what they considered to be the law of Moses. But here's the irony. Usually that was like Sabbath breaking. And so they were always saying, Jesus, you're breaking the fourth commandment. And here, what's he responding with? Okay, fine, you're hyper aware of your interpretation of the fourth commandment. How about a pretty clear declaration of the sixth commandment? Thou shalt not kill. And yet that's okay by you? As you seek to kill me? Talk about straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. I do think the sixth commandment is more important than the fourth along these lines. Now, Jesus goes on, and in verse 21 says, I have done one work, and ye all marvel. And he'd done a lot more than one work, but yes, they were all marvelous works. Now, Moses therefore gave unto you circumcision, not because it is of Moses, but of the fathers. Circumcision was from Abraham's day, it far preceded Moses. But anyway, that's something that you do because of the law of Moses. In fact, ye on the Sabbath day keep that part of the law. On the Sabbath day, you circumcise a man, if that's the day it falls on. If a man on the Sabbath day receives circumcision, then, that the law of Moses should not be broken, are ye angry at me because I've made a man every whit whole on the Sabbath day? You see, so much of the opposition Jesus has already faced is because of things he did on the Sabbath. And what did he do on the Sabbath? He helped people. He healed people. He blessed people. He brought them into the real rest of the Lord. But that got the scribes and Pharisees up in arms. How dare you? Well, how dare you work on the Sabbath? What are you talking about? Well, you circumcise people. Well, that doesn't count as work. That's part of the covenant. Well, guess what? The real covenant is to be compassionate. The real covenant is to show mercy and love to all those around you. It's to serve your fellow man. And you're not doing that. You're condemning them. You're condemning me for trying to help them. I'm doing a lot more than mere circumcision. I just wish you would circumcise your hearts and cut off that hard-heartedness and allow the truth to penetrate into a softened soul. I'm trying to do what Moses did, and you won't let me. He says in verse 24, judge not according to the appearance. The JST says, according to your traditions. Either way, it's a powerful message. Don't judge along those outward things or those those long-held kinds of beliefs. Instead, he says, judge righteous judgment. Sounds a lot like the JST of Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. Remember that one, Sermon on the Mount? Or judge not unrighteously, but judge righteous judgment. Well, they are judging unrighteously. They're condemning the lawgiver as a breaker of the law. They're pitting Moses against Jesus when it was Jesus who inspired Moses in the first place and spoke to him out of the midst of the burning bush. You people are just judging based on what you see or what you think you see. You're basing things on outward appearance. You're basing things on mere tradition. You're going by the book and the letter of the law, but breaking the spirit of the law left and right. Have you ever called customer service? And if you are lucky enough to get past the recordings and actually get to a human being, sometimes not even that helps. Because you're like, oh great, you're a human being that doesn't think like one. You're just going, you might as well be a recording. You're just going by the book. It's the appearance, or it's the tradition, or this is the policy, and there's nothing I can do about it. And it's like, oh, come on. There's something you can do about it. Please hear me out and think through this, because that policy doesn't exactly apply in my case. So are there any customer service reps out there that are willing to think and hear my specific story and then apply your principle? I'm not trying to destroy the law. I'm trying to fulfill it, okay? But are you willing to think about my situation and get past mere appearance or tradition? We have to do more thinking as we judge our own actions and as we judge the actions of others. We have to get past appearance, we have to get past culture and tradition and think more about commandments and covenants and spirit instead. Then, verse 25, said some of them of Jerusalem, and that's important because these are the locals, okay? These are the folks who know the word on the street, because they're on the street themselves. They're the ones who live under the watchful eye of that Jewish leadership that Jesus just called out for wanting to kill him. And notice what they say here. It's classic. Those of Jerusalem say, hey, wait a minute. Is not this he whom they seek to kill? Which is hilarious, because Jesus calls them out. You're trying to kill me. They fight back, push back, and go, what are you talking about? No one would ever try to kill you. And then the locals are like, hey, isn't this the guy they're trying to kill? Again, it's hilarious. Well, it would be if this wasn't so serious as far as what they're plotting. They know what they've heard and the rumors on the streets, and maybe that's why they're searching for Jesus. I wonder if he's even going to come. This is a dangerous place to be, even on a celebratory pilgrimage feast week. Is he going to show? He did. He called him out. Are they going to let that stand? Isn't this the guy? What's going on? Are you as confused as they are? Chapter 7 is mass confusion, with all these rumors and people dividing over things and differences of opinions. And remember what Jesus asked Peter and the apostles in Matthew 16. Whom do men say that I am? Well, there's all kinds of options, and they're wondering and worrying, but they know more than, I don't know, there's just something here that's really powerful about what do you think about Jesus. Now, the leaders are denying it all the way through, right? Even though the people on the street know it. Then keep reading. Right after they ask, isn't this the guy they tried to kill? They add, but lo, he speaketh boldly, and they say nothing unto him. If they're trying to kill him, surely this is worthy of condemning to death, the kind of stuff he's calling them out for. He's pushing back against them with the help of Moses, and these are Mosaic scholars themselves. But they're not saying anything. They're not pushing back. And then their fascinating conclusion. Do the rulers know indeed that this is the very Christ? Maybe that's why they don't fight back. They know he's right. They know he's the Messiah. But then if that's true, why all these rumors about trying to kill him? I don't understand. I'm blown away by this part of John 7. The boldness of Jesus in the face of opposition. To call them out as murderers, and yet they won't prove him right, at least not yet. The people confused, like, they're going to kill him, but then he won't. But then, I don't know. What do they think of Christ? What do I think of Christ? I don't know. There's actually a great scene in the book of Alma after Ammon has converted King Lamoni, and everybody's kind of passed out in this celestial coma, right? And then the crowds come and they're like, what's going on? And they're confused, and they're passing judgment on Ammon, and some think he's an angel, and some think he's a devil, basically. One of the onlookers says a fascinating thing. He admits more than he probably wanted to when he says, maybe this is that great spirit that always seems to side with the Nephites. Did you catch what he just admitted? It's like, why do the Nephites always beat us in war, even though we always seem to outnumber them? It's almost like they have God on their side. Oh, maybe they do. That's an admission. And this is an admission too. Despite the fact they won't follow Jesus, they don't seem willing to fight him. Maybe they're fighting themselves, a natural man, spiritual man. And I know, but I would not know, right, Amulek? Or, Lord, I believe, but help thou my unbelief, right? Desperate father of this suffering boy. Aren't we all in there somewhere? Do we know more than we let on? Down deep? Do we have testimonies that we just struggle to live up to? But notice what they say next in verse 27. Howbeit we know this man whence he is, but when Christ cometh, no man knoweth whence he is. And a pause there, because that's worth unpacking. There's an irony here when it says, we know this guy. I mean, he's from Nazareth. And no good thing can come from Nazareth, right, Nathaniel? This is some Galilean miracle worker, healer, preacher, but Messiah? No, he can't be, because we know too much about him. And the Messiah, as they say here, nobody knows where he's going to come from. This is kind of another layer of the no man is prophet in his own country, because they think they know him, when in reality they don't. But they confine him to their own assumptions. And no, the real Messiah is going to kind of come out of nowhere and throw off the Roman yoke and free us all. He's going to kind of come charging in, white knight on this white stallion. And this guy, no, he's just a carpenter's kid. We know too much about him for him to be the Messiah. Now, again, think about the condescending Christ. On the one hand, what they're describing here, of no man knoweth whence he is, this is this emphasis on the ineffable, that God could not possibly be known. The Messiah is untouchable. He's going to come out of nowhere. And sadly, I think sometimes we assume that that's true of God too. That God is unknowable and unapproachable and inexplicable and ineffable. And while that's partially true, that's only half the contrary. That's the high Christology. That's the infinite that fills us with awe. But this is the Word made flesh when Jesus came down to be among us. He came down to prove that God is approachable, that you can come to know me as a Messiah who wanders around Galilee with you. That's amazing. There's this interesting rhetorical term called apophasis. And apophasis is sometimes used in debate. It's often used in like mudslinging political campaigns, because it allows you to say things and still deny that you ever said them. It's kind of genius. Apophasis is kind of like this. When you say about your opponent, oh, I would never call you dishonest, at least not publicly, and I certainly don't want to bring up your troubled past. Let's just stick with the tasks at hand and let's argue policy issues, shall we? Now, did you catch what the person just did? What did they just said without saying it? I'm not trying to call you dishonest. But what did you just hint at? The man's dishonesty. And I'm not going to bring up your sordid past. You just brought it up by saying you weren't going to bring it up. I know, that's apophasis for you. It's amazing. I still have plausible deniability. I never said those things when I said I wasn't going to say them. Well, if that's debate or if that's rhetoric, turn it to theology, because there is something called apophatic theology, and it's still based on that idea of apophasis. And what apophatic theology is God is so distant and so beyond our mortal comprehension that we cannot describe him in any way. The only way we can describe him, the only way we can say what he is by saying what he isn't. In other words, if I can say this about him, then it can't apply to God, because God's better than that. He's bigger than that. And so it's kind of this negative, kind of fill the negative space. And here's all these things I can say. God is far superior, above and beyond any of that. It's kind of hard to wrap our heads around, but that has prevailed in a lot of human history, just assuming that God can't be understood, so why even try? Well, Jesus came to earth so we could not only try but succeed, that we could come to know both the Father and the Son as we come to know Jesus Christ and his gospel. It's not apophatic theology. Yes, he's ineffable, but he's also approachable. Yes, he's infinite, but he desires to be intimate in a covenant relationship with us. That's who Jesus is. So I had to pause there on that verse, because what they're saying is so interesting. We know Jesus, when in reality they didn't. We can't know the Messiah, when in reality they could. He's standing right in front of you, the person you think you know. But from there, verse 28, then cried Jesus in the temple as he taught. Again, all eyes on him, saying, ye both know me, and ye know whence I am. At least you think you do. But then pointed it back to the Father, I am not come of myself. So why does it even matter to know me? Who cares where I'm from? I'm not the point. God is. So he says, but he that sent me is true, whom ye know not. But I know him, for I am from him, and he hath sent me. Oh, that's how we really know ourselves, is where am I from? What am I here to accomplish? The ultimate identity for all of us, as President Nelson has said, is children of God. And so for Jesus to lay claim to that identity, I know God because I'm from God. I'm his son. And like father, like son, I know who he is. He sent me so you can come to know who he is too. And to God be that glory. Now for the Jews, those are fighting words. You're getting too full of yourself. You are shining the light on yourself if you claim to be one that's like God. And so verse 30, then they sought to take him. So there's anger on the one hand. But on the other hand, no man laid hands on him because his hour was not yet come. So again, this tug of war within themselves, like, I got to get rid of this guy. Oh, but I can't get rid of this guy because the people are believing in him, and I can't prove that he's right. When he calls out the fact that we're trying to kill him, that's an interesting prophecy. And I want to turn him into a false prophet by not killing him, but darn it, I know he's a true prophet, and we got to kill him. Interesting, the rock and a hard place they find themselves between. Now, they sought to take him. They don't. His hour isn't come. But what do the people respond? Verse 31, many of the people believed on him and said, when Christ cometh, will he do more miracles than these which this man hath done? I mean, think about it. If this guy isn't the Messiah, then who else could be? Because if this man's actions aren't messianic, I don't know what is. This is like John the Baptist sending his disciples to Jesus. Go see what you see. And Jesus, playing along, says, go tell them what you saw. And they're blown away. This has got to be the guy. And that's how the Jewish multitudes are feeling here. This is as good as it gets. He must be the Messiah. But that's just their opinion. The Pharisees, meanwhile, heard that the people murmured such things concerning him. They're like, we're losing popular opinion. They're starting to fall into line following this Jesus character, and that's going to take away from our authority and power. So we got to put an end to that. And so the Pharisees and chief priests sent officers to take him. This is a preview of next spring, when Judas will bring a band of officers to take Jesus. You sense the confusion that is surrounding this Christ? Is he the Christ? I don't know. Messiah or mere man? From above or from beneath? A good man, deceiver? I don't know. I'm as confused as everybody else. Deliverer, demagogue, carpenter, king. What think ye of Christ? Whom do men say that I am? Whom do ye say that I am? What did you expect of me? Because usually it's your expectations that are causing the problem. It's judging by appearances. It's judging by tradition. Remember John 6. You thought I was going to be a military Messiah. Nope. Is that too hard of a saying? Does it offend you? Will you no longer follow? Oh, it's so interesting, our own expectations that sometimes get in the way. Thinking that prophets are perfect, for example, and not realizing that they have humanity within their divine call as well. Thinking that every decision made is 100% inspiration, when agency is part of things as well. Maybe it's the expectation that life is supposed to be easy when I'm living the gospel, when it wasn't easy for the source of the gospel itself. That God answers every prayer the way I want him to, and that suffering should never have to be endured when you're a disciple of Christ. Now, our expectations, our assumptions, our judgment by appearance and tradition will get us into trouble. And that's the case for them. Now, verse 33 and 34, Jesus responds. He speaks up and says to them, "Yet a little while am I with you, and then I go unto him that sent me," again referring to the Father. "And ye shall seek me, and shall not find me, and where I am, thither ye cannot come." Now, this is going to confuse them, and they'll ask about it in just a moment, but sit with it for a minute. Yet a little while am I with you. We keep seeing the clock tick, and we're getting closer and closer to Holy Week next spring. Jesus is letting them know, you've got to come now, because you don't have all the time in the world. The day will come where you'll want to seek me, and I won't be found. Now that's ironic, because isn't he the one that said, "Seek and ye shall find"? Well, yeah, if you do it now, when the window of opportunity is open. This is the time to prepare to meet God, Amulek tells us. We have to take advantage of the time when the light is shining. Next spring, when the light is snuffed out, it's going to be too late to search because there's no light to see by. And where I am at that point, with God, with him who sent me, you can't come because you didn't come when I called. Now in verse 35, here's their confusion. Then said the Jews among themselves, "Whither will he go, that we shall not find him?" Well, what does he mean by that? Will he go unto the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? What manner of saying is this that he said, "Ye shall seek me and shall not find me, and where I am, thither ye cannot come"? Well, at least they listened closely. They got the language right, but not the interpretation. They didn't understand. To me, it's interesting that they would immediately assume it's Gentiles. I mean, this guy goes everywhere, but we can follow anywhere. I mean, if you want to. He went to the Decapolis, and we could follow and watch him cast out demons. He went to the Samaritans. If you want to go into Samaria, you can find him there too. Where else is there? I mean, he wouldn't go among Gentiles, would he? And interesting for them to suggest. It even makes me wonder, do they know that there is a Jewish responsibility toward the Gentiles? That they're God's chosen people, but they're chosen to choose everyone else? Do they realize that they have a work of gathering to do, and it's not just gathering Israel, it's gathering all into the kingdom of God? They think Gentiles. We'll see this hinted at again in chapter 10, when he speaks of other sheep that he's going to go to. Well, where would they be? Right? Can we follow? I guess not. Now, verse 37, In the last day, so now we've gotten the grand climax, the crescendo of this whole week of feasting. The last day, that great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, "If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He that believeth on me, as the scripture hath said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water." And then John has to insert something to make sure we understand what Jesus was talking about. "But this spake he of the Spirit." That's what that living water is, okay? "Which they that believe on him should receive. For the Holy Ghost was not yet given, because that Jesus was not yet glorified." The JST clarifies it even more. "For the Holy Ghost was promised unto them who believe after that Jesus was glorified." And John, looking back at this moment, from a vantage point of later history, remembers the day of Pentecost. He remembers when the Spirit was poured out upon the people. And he received that gift that the Lord had promised him. Here, he has to do some explaining. This is the river of living water that Jesus is talking about. But notice Jesus also had some explaining of his own, because he said, "As the scriptures say." So Jesus is quoting some Old Testament passage. Now, the Old Testament talks about water, symbolic of better things, spiritual things, in a lot of different passages. But this idea of a river of living water flowing, I mean, Ezekiel talked about that, a river from the temple and flowing out to heal the Dead Sea. Could that be that one? Well, maybe. Or how about this one from Zechariah? Because Zechariah was a messianic prophet if ever there was one. In Zechariah 14, verse 8 and 9, "It shall be in that day that living waters shall go out from Jerusalem. Half of them toward the former sea, half of them toward the hinder sea." You see, Jerusalem's up in the mountaintops, and if the water flows downhill, well, it can flow both ways. It can flow west toward the Mediterranean. It can flow east toward the Dead Sea. Either way, it will bring life everywhere it goes. In fact, Zechariah adds, "In summer and in winter shall it be." So both rainy season and dry season. This water is living. It never dies. It never dries up. And then he adds, "And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall there be one Lord, and his name one." And that seems to be something Jesus hints at in chapter 10 also, about one fold and one shepherd. He is that Lord. He is that king over all the earth. And he's come into his capital city during the Feast of Tabernacles. It's time to come out of the wilderness. It's time to come into the promised land. And this king is coming into his kingdom, his capital city. And it's through him that the living water will flow. In fact, he is that living water, or the Spirit that he promises is living water that will quench every spiritual thirst. Remember, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. There's the Beatitudes, Sermon on the Mount. They shall be filled with what? The Holy Ghost. And the Lord is promising them that here. But notice how he phrased it. When he says he's quoting Scripture, and then he says, "Out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water." You see, there's so many layers of this symbolism, because if this is the Feast of Tabernacles, which it is, there was a part of the ritual that took place was a procession every day during this week, where a priest would walk from the temple down to the pool of Siloam. Now, the pool of Siloam had an important history in Israel also, because that's the pool that would collect the water that flowed from the Gihon spring outside of the city walls down through Hezekiah's tunnel into that pool of Siloam. Hezekiah was inspired to know, we're going to die. Well, it doesn't take inspiration to know that you're going to die without water. And so his thought, last year in the Old Testament, remember when we studied this? If the enemies come and lay siege to Jerusalem, we're dead because we have no water source. The closest one is the Gihon spring, but it's on the other side of the wall. Who built the wall where they did? Well, let's dig a tunnel underneath the wall where the waters from the spring, that living water outside, can then flow inside to give us life, no matter how much we might be trapped by our enemies. That's a pretty good symbol for Spirit. It's a well of living water. It's within us. Sound like what Jesus said to the woman at the well? This is like the Jewish version of what he said to the Samaritan woman back in John 4. He's now telling his people, you can have a spring of living water in you as well. Now, what would happen on the day on the Feast of of Tabernacles, though, is this priest would walk down to the pool of Siloam, where this water had flowed, and he would fill a golden vessel with that water, that living water. Pure gold doesn't rust, right? Then he would bring it back in this massive procession, the crowd's following, to honor this gift of God that he's given them in living water. And then he would return it back to the temple and pour that living water from the golden vessel into a silver basin before the altar of God. Pretty amazing ritual. And the people would celebrate. Now, here's Jesus at this time period, at this festival, on the highest day, the great day of the feast. Oh, forget the priest. I'm the high priest of good things to come. Forget the Gihon spring. I'll give you a spring of water, living water, springing up within you unto everlasting life. Forget the pool of Siloam. Come unto me, and if you thirst, I will give you living water. In fact, there's another layer to this. Because if this is the Feast of Tabernacles, honoring the wilderness wanderings, where did they get their water in the wilderness? I mean, we saw manna from heaven, there's bread of life. That was the bread of life discourse 1 chapter ago. If bread of life is chapter 6, then living water is chapter 7. And where did they get that? In their wilderness wanderings? Oh yeah, Moses smote the rock. And out of the cavity of the rock, water began to flow to give the Israelites life. Now, did you catch how Jesus quoted the scripture? Whichever one he happened to be referring to. Out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. Belly is an interesting translation. The Greek word actually just means a cavity in the body. It's often translated womb. So out of the womb, think about what birth is. Your water breaks, and out of the womb flows this water that preserved life. And life comes out right along with it. It's amazing to think of this maternal imagery here, okay? But then add to that, smiting the rock and water comes out. And who is Jesus? This is Moses 2.0. This is that mighty prophet who has come among us, and he's offering us living water on the day we're celebrating our wilderness wanderings. Here he is at the temple, the tabernacle itself. And the Lord is here. At this layer, when he is crucified, the following spring, and a Roman spear pierces his side, creating a cavity in the body, the belly, the womb, what comes forth? Not just blood, but water. Jesus doesn't just smite the rock and allow water to flow. He is the rock of our salvation. And when he is smitten, living water comes forth from his womb to give us new birth. This is the Feast of Tabernacles. This is the living water. This is who Jesus is. Are you seeing that? In verse 40, some did. Many of the people, therefore, when they heard this saying, said, of a truth, this is the prophet. Not just a prophet, the one like unto Moses, the one that brought water from the rock. This is happening all over again. He's bringing us into his promised land. He's preserving and preparing and purifying us through the wilderness. Now that's one opinion. Others said, oh no, he's more than the prophet. This is the Christ. This is the Messiah. Like I said before, if this isn't messianic, I don't know what is. But then some said, wait a minute. Shall Christ come out of Galilee? Because that's where this guy's from, right? Hath not the scripture said that Christ cometh of the seed of David, and out of the town of Bethlehem where David was? So there was a division among the people because of him. So still we see this continuing confusion over the identity of Jesus. It's always going to be that way. Deep divisions that enter as people decide how they feel about Jesus Christ and his gospel. But did you catch the irony of what they just said? Remember back in verse 27 when they say, oh, we know where this guy is from, but nobody knows where the Messiah is going to come from. Well, now flip it. And what do we see here? They're like, well, he can't be the Messiah because we know where the Messiah is going to come from. He's going to come from Bethlehem. And we know that Jesus didn't come from Bethlehem. He came from Galilee. You missed it. You're 0 for 2, people. You missed it on both counts. You were right that the Messiah would come from Bethlehem. That's clear Old Testament prophecy too. But you didn't know that Jesus was actually born there. That he's not just the living water. He is the bread of life. Bethlehem means house of bread. You don't get it. He is what we hunger and thirst for. And so we come unto him. But these people, just make up your minds. You think you know where he's from, but you're wrong in your assumption. And you think you can't know where the Messiah is from, but the scriptures said it right. You think you know the scriptures and you don't. You think you know Jesus and you don't know him either. So interesting what's happening here. Now, verse 44, some of them would have taken him. So they're still up in arms. We got to put this thing to bed. We got to end it and end him. They want to take him. But no man laid hands on him. They're afraid of what the people will think. We can't prove him right when he called us out that we're going to kill him. What do we do then? And then came the officers to the chief priests and Pharisees, and they said unto them, why have ye not brought him? The officers answered, never man spake like this man. It's so interesting. The scribes and Pharisees are like, we're not going to do it. We can't do this, but we can get the Romans to do our dirty work. Let's get these officers out there and go take Jesus in. Go arrest him and drag him back. And we can take care of him behind closed doors. Maybe after the feast is over and the people scatter. But what do the officers say? I'm not taking him. I'm not going to arrest him. I've never heard anybody talk like this guy. There's something to him. Even Romans can sense that. There's actually a hilarious story from early church history. When Wilford Woodruff is serving his mission in England and baptizing people by the hundreds and thousands, and the Anglicans, Church of England, the ministers there are starting to get concerned. There's more people following this crazy American missionary than are coming to our chapels on Sunday. So what do we do? And one Anglican minister sent a constable to go arrest Wilford Woodruff. We've got to put an end to this. He's a disturber of the peace. Well, the constable goes and didn't want to disturb the peace himself. So he thought, well, I'll let him finish his sermon. And as soon as he's done, then I'll arrest him. Well, by the end of Wilford Woodruff's sermon, sure enough, the constable went up to him, but not to arrest him, to ask for baptism at his hand. Never man spake like this man. Will you baptize me? Well, the Anglican minister was frustrated by that, so he said, okay, fine, plan B. And he took 2 of his own clerks and said, go and sneak in among the meeting that this guy is preaching at and take some notes for me and let's figure out what he's trying to say so we can take him down. And the 2 clerks went, and I don't know how they got, how they did with their note taking, but by the time the sermon was over, they went to Wilford Woodruff too and said, will you baptize us? And he did. By the way, that was the last time that Anglican minister sent anybody to go spy on Wilford Woodruff. It's like my people are dropping like flies. No. There's something about, well, just come and see. Something about follow me. Something about do his will and you'll know the doctrine. And these officers realize who the superior officer is. And it's Jesus. We've never seen anything like it. So verse 47, then answered them the Pharisees, are ye also deceived? I'm sure that's what the Anglican was thinking about his clerks or thinking about the constable. How could you fall for this as well? And then notice what they say, defending their disbelief. Have any of the rulers or of the Pharisees believed on him? But this people who knoweth not the law, they're cursed. Now, notice what they just said. First, they threw the people under the bus. Well, I don't know. Popular opinion seems to be swinging in Jesus' direction. Oh, popular opinion, who cares about them? Well, they do. That's kind of, they're relying upon popular opinion to preserve their own power and authority. All these people, I mean, their reeds shaking in the wind, and they're shaking in their boots that people are starting to follow Jesus. But what do they say to stop the officers? Look at us. Do we believe in him? Now, if I was a snarky officer, I would probably say, no, but that says more about you than about him. And that's true. Our response to Jesus reveals more about us than it reveals about Jesus. And so for these Pharisees, these rulers, to say, we don't believe in him. And that should be enough evidence for you not to follow him either. And instead people are thinking, actually that's enough evidence for me not to follow you. Fascinating. Now, that's not all the leaders. Thankfully, there was an occasional exception to the wicked rule. And this one is an exception we've already come to know. And hopefully love, for his courage in coming unto Christ to see for himself, at least. In verse 50, we see Nicodemus again. It's been a while. We saw him in chapter 3 of John, under cover of darkness, wanting to come and find out if this teacher come from God was more than a teacher and had really come from God. John 3 is fascinating to understand Nicodemus and where he's coming from. I would love to know more of his backstory, of what took place in his mind and heart between chapter 3 and chapter 7. Because here he speaks up. Remember, people aren't willing to speak up for fear of the Jews. Well, here's a Jewish leader who's not afraid of his own fellow rulers. And at least says this, Nicodemus saith unto them, and John inserts in parentheses, yeah, that same Nicodemus, he that came to Jesus by night, being one of them. But this is what Nicodemus said. Doth our law judge any man before it hear him and know what he doeth? Just wondering. I might not be the senior member of the Sanhedrin, so I'm just kind of, curious about some of our legal code. Do we pass judgment before the trial or after? I can't remember. I missed that day of law school. Anybody remember? Is it innocent until proven guilty, or is it guilty because we just don't like this guy and we're not even going to hold it a trial? For them, or for Nicodemus that is, I don't know, maybe we should find out for ourselves. Maybe we should experiment upon the word. Maybe we should come and see, even if there isn't a lot of light to see by. That's exactly what he had done. And he came away at least with enough of an understanding to defend Jesus against those that were accusing him with no evidence. Now, how does that play out with his peers? They answered and said unto him, Art thou also of Galilee? Search and look, for out of Galilee ariseth no prophet. Notice they didn't even respond to his comment, oh, we don't need to have a trial. We already have all the evidence we need. The scriptures say the Messiah will come from Bethlehem, and that's not where this Jesus character is from. So we can summarily dismiss the case without having to sit and consider it. And not only do they dismiss what Nicodemus said, they dismiss Nicodemus. This is character assassination. This is now getting angry at him. How dare you stand up to us when you're one of us? What, are you from Galilee yourself? You should know better. And then the story ends, this chapter ends. And every man went unto his own house. Tragic when standing at the house of the Lord is the Lord of the house himself. You could have come to him, into his house, into his Father's house where there are many mansions. And yet, no. Confused or convinced, they didn't come to know Christ. And so they reject him. Now, with the ending of chapter 7, chapter 8 then gives us a chance to wrestle more with this question of who Jesus really is. And again, we get to see that opposition continuing to mount. The thought of sending officers in to arrest him and drag him away, no, that's not going to work. The people seem to be more convinced of him than we wanted them to be. So what are we going to do? Well, somehow we're going to have to turn people against him. We're going to have to plant some additional evidence so people will know that this is not a prophet. This is not a Messiah. This is not a second Moses. In fact, the first Moses would be against him, just like we guardians of Moses' law are. So how are we going to do that? Well, turn to chapter 8 and let's watch this next dramatic scene unfold. Verse 1 through 3, Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives. And that's often where travelers from out of town would sleep during their pilgrimage feasts, right? There's no room in the inn. And so, well, it's still fall. It's not too cold yet. It's tabernacles. Let's go set up a tabernacle. We'll pitch a tent on the Mount of Olives and we can camp out. And so that's where Jesus has been. But then, early in the morning, he came again into the temple. That's where he's been spending most of his time during this week, right? To spend it, the Lord of the house, at his house. There, are you seeing the scene? Okay, this is Temple Square. They're not inside the building. Only the priests could do that. But around Temple Square, the crowds are still milling around. It's early in the morning, but Jesus is there in the midst. It says that all the people came unto him. He's the most important person in Jerusalem at the time. Everybody wants to know what he's all about. So picture him in the middle, surrounded by people in these early morning hours. He sat down and he taught them. So far, so good. Exactly what we'd expect of Jesus. But now the plot thickens. And the scribes and Pharisees, those same ones that couldn't catch him yesterday, are now trying again. They brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, now pause there for a minute. We're going to see what they say in just a moment. But this is as dramatic a scene as you can imagine. A woman taken in adultery. And the Greek word there is interesting because it's almost like this seize or capture, but seize with such excitement, like you just won the lottery. Like you are seizing the prize, the laurel wreath, the gold medal. You've won. They've taken this woman in adultery and they set her in the midst. Wait. In the midst of what? Remember, it's early in the morning, which means the adultery probably just occurred. It's in the midst of a multitude. Remember, the crowds have come to listen to Jesus. They're there on the Temple Mount, a place of holiness and purity, and yet impurity personified has just been dragged in and thrown at Jesus' feet. Can you picture the gasp of horror as every crowd is looking on and know exactly what kind of woman this is? Remember the 3N sinner we met a while ago? Well, I don't know how many N's are in this one, but what does she look like? What is she wearing? Is she dressed? Is she half dressed? Is she wrapped up in a blanket? I don't know, but picture what the people are thinking and horrified and the scribes and Pharisees almost cackling with glee. Look what we found. Look at the prize we have seized as we took her and threw her in the middle of this mass. Now, what do they say? Verse 4. They say unto him, Master. Can you feel the hypocrisy dripping off their teeth? Oh, Master, this woman was taken in adultery, in the very act. We caught her red-handed. Now, Moses, in the law, you remember you brought up Moses just the other day and accused us of not following him. Well, who's not following Moses here? Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? You see what they're doing? They're pitting prophet against prophet. You're going to be on Moses' side or not? Moses says to stone her. And you can tell that this is a setup because of the next phrase. This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. In fact, the whole thing does smack of a setup. Something's off here. Wait, she was caught in the very act? Well, it takes two to tango, so where's the male then? Where's the man? You only brought her? She is being used as a pawn. And the goal of this chess match is to checkmate Jesus. So often adultery or immorality in general is the objectification of someone to get something you want at their expense. We'll talk about these scribes and Pharisees objectifying this poor woman. Did they set the whole thing up? Was the man in this adultery case one of their own? Someone they used, and if you'll just do this, that way I'll know where an adulteress will be, and we can take her in the very act. We'll let you off the hook. We just need Exhibit A. And when they seize her gloriously, their prize pawn, and throw him at Jesus' feet, now we can pit Jesus against Moses. Because you two can't agree. Or can you? You see, part of the challenge here is we've got to make this a darned if you do and darned if you don't situation. We have to catch Jesus between a rock and a hard place. Or in this case, between a rock and a soft place, because we know his heart is the soft place. Jesus always seems to be moved with compassion. He keeps breaking the law of Moses in order to heal people. But I could see how some people might say, is he really breaking the law of Moses? He's doing good on the Sabbath day. Surely the Sabbath was made for things like that. Okay, fine. Let's up the ante. And let's make it all the more obvious that the law of Moses is being broken here. Let's take someone that's breaking not just forget the fourth commandment. Let's go with the seventh, shall we? Thou shalt not commit adultery. And if we can find somebody, or plant somebody, who's breaking that, and then throw them into the midst, the soft place will be Jesus' compassionate heart. The hard place will be the tablets of stone that God himself wrote on with his finger, that Moses brought before the people, and made obedience or made disobedience to those commandments a capital crime. We saw death penalty plenty last year in the Old Testament. So Jesus, what do you say? You going to side with Moses? Or are you going to go against him? Now, like I said, darn if you do, darn if you don't, because if Jesus sides with Moses, which seems to be what they're demanding, Moses said, we're the guardians of the law, and we have to stone this person. Moses said, unto us. That's the command from the commander-in-chief. But if they're trying to turn public opinion against Jesus, you see, it's the public opinion they fear, even more than Jesus. Because, I mean, if nobody believes in him, then yeah, go ahead and keep spouting off this gibberish about you being the Messiah. If nobody takes you seriously, then we don't have to either. But the people, they're falling into line. So we have to turn the people against Jesus. So if Jesus comes down on the side of justice and says, yep, Moses said that we gotta follow the law of Moses. I'm serious about the seventh commandment. Then the people are going to be like, whoa, a Messiah without any mercy? I'm not perfect. And if he demands that level of perfection, if he's going to be a stickler, because by this point in Jewish history, the public opinion was against the death penalty. And they couldn't even execute the death penalty anyway, because the Romans are in charge of all of that. So it was not being, the law was not being upheld to this degree of strictness. Even remember Joseph, Jesus' stepfather. When Mary is found to be with child before their marriage, so here's fornication, here's adultery, you could say. Even he was minded to put her away privily. In fact, you remember the adjective used to describe Joseph early on in the story? He was a just man, which means Joseph was defined by his justice and yet let mercy prevail. He found some kind of legal loophole. I can't marry her. That would be unjust of me. But I don't want to stone her. That would be unmerciful. So I'll just put her away privily and end the betrothal. Well, the scribes and Pharisees here are assuming Jesus will have to pick one or the other. They've set it up that way. If you side with Moses, then the people will not side with you. They are begging for a compassionate Christ. But then again, if you are that compassionate Christ and you err on the side of mercy, then we can clearly determine that you're anti-Mosaic, and we can use that against you. So make your pick. We don't care which it is. Now, again, back to the genius of Jesus. Somehow, his stepfather was able to balance justice and mercy for his own mother's sake. I do wonder, as Jesus looks at this woman, and yes, sees guilt, I wonder if he also sees his mother, who was innocent, but was assumed guilty until an angel intervened and Joseph came to her rescue. Well, here's Jesus about to come to this woman's rescue, but he still has his own dilemma to navigate. What do I do? They've given me two options. I have to pick one of them, and either way, they're going to make me look bad. So which do I pick? Oh, I know. How about I pick both? Which never crossed the Pharisees' mind. No, these are mutually exclusive. It's an either or. And Jesus said, let's turn it into a both and then. Let's prove contraries. This is my favorite example in all the scriptures to teach the proving of contraries. It's actually my home base when I try to teach it to my students. Because there's so many other examples of contraries to be proven, and some of them are really deep and sophisticated and hard to wrap your head around. And so when we're kind of out in the weeds, wrestling with some of the more confusing ones, if we're ever kind of beyond ourselves, we come rushing back to John chapter 8 and just settle into this contrary of justice and mercy with this woman to kind of get our bearings again. And then we go out, journey into unseen territory. Now, notice how he's going to do it, but watch what he does first. Okay? Verse 6. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not, which is fascinating. I tried to dramatize. I don't think I'm guilty of over-dramatizing, because I don't know if you can over-dramatize this one. An adulteress caught in the act and thrown in the middle of a multitude listening to Jesus preach the gospel on Temple Square. Can you imagine something like this happen? This picture in the middle of church. Sacrament meeting with a revered church leader speaking, and then some adulteress being thrown into the middle of sacrament meeting, and everyone just shock and awe. It's dramatic, all right. All eyes on her, or covering eyes not to see things, and yet can't look away, and passing judgment with their gaze alone. And what does Jesus do? Master of the situation. He takes the eyes off of her onto himself. But he does it in such a calm way, because he hasn't even spoken. He hasn't said a word. But as they are putting him between this rock and the hard place, or the rock and the soft place. By the way, I'm sure that they assumed he would forgive her. They probably knew him well enough for that. But they're going to turn that against him, right? He's an anti-Mosaic. But he doesn't say anything. He doesn't, it's almost as if, he says it, as if he heard them not. He just ignores them and stoops down and starts writing on the ground. When they called him master, he was master of the situation. And diffused the ticking time bomb by appearing not to take it seriously. What? I don't hear any ticking. I didn't hear your question. And he stoops down and he starts to write. And by writing things, can you picture the natural curiosity of the people? It would take something pretty intense to pull the gaze off of this guilty woman. But to see the judge starting to like take notes and write things down, I'd be dying to know what he's writing. Now, some have wondered, literally, what is he writing here? And there's all kinds of speculation, but that's all it is. It's just speculation. Some have wondered, is he writing down the sins of those scribes and Pharisees? Like, oh yeah? You caught her in the act? Well, guess what I know about you? And he's writing things down. Maybe drawing arrows in the sand to show which one he's accusing. That's speculation, but yeah, it would be interesting. Some have suggested maybe Jesus is writing down the 10 Commandments and just reiterating them. That's a fascinating one, especially since it was his finger who wrote the original copy. Oh, there's something amazingly poetic if that's the case, especially since then he carved them in stone, and here he's writing them in dust. Picture, for example, commandments are set in stone, but your own sins, your own breaking of those commandments, he only records those in the dirt. All the easier to blow them away and forget about them. That's forgiveness that comes on the heels of real repentance. I don't know what he's writing. Maybe he's just doodling, just playing Pictionary. Something to get the eyes off of her and onto something else. In fact, this is even really good psychology. When someone is flooded with emotion and they're triggered and they're overcome with things, and picture all the people, her particularly, but all the people just emotional, up in arms, and then Jesus gives them something different to focus on. There's a beautiful, they call it a grounding technique. We got to get you grounded. And here's Jesus stooping down on the ground, getting them focused on the ground beneath them. And there's a great grounding technique. We've used it in our kids when mental health was hard and they're flooded with things. We would often just go, okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the 5 was, give me 5 things you can see. We got to engage the senses. 5 things you can see, and look and point and show me something. And Jesus is giving them something to look at. 4 is feel. Can you feel 4 things? Touch something. Just touch something and everything around you. And the sense of that will get your mind on that. Something else to focus on. 3 was hear. What do you hear? I wonder what the people see as Jesus stoops. I wonder what they feel. There's something chalky, the dirt. Is it sand? Is it gravel? Are they feeling it, the ground more firmly beneath them as they sit there on the Temple Mount? What do they hear? Are they hearing the gasps of people passing judgment? Are they hearing the cries of this woman that is being judged harshly by everyone present? Number 2 is smell. What do you smell? Can you smell anything there in the early morning hours on the Temple Mount? Is the incense altar, the altar of sacrifice, do you smell the sweet savor of offerings to God? And number 1 is taste. What do you taste? Well, will they taste the goodness of God? The fruit of the tree of life that is sweet above all that is sweet? These grounding techniques are fascinating. And it's just to let the wave crash and the flood pass and think again. Okay? You've been engaging your mind in other things. So there's Jesus, master of the situation, writing something on the ground. I don't want these scribes and Pharisees to sensationalize the situation, even though it is pretty shock and awe. Remember the scandalizo we saw last time about offending people and the scandalizing, sensationalizing to be selective and superficial. And all of this is happening right here as they see it unfold. Then verse 7 and 8. So when they continued asking him, they're not going to give up yet. They're not going to allow him to avoid the issue. Oh, no, Jesus, we've trapped you. And there's no getting out of this one. You have to decide. So we're going to keep on asking. But as they do, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. What did he write down this time? Again, we don't know. It's all speculation. Is he writing their sins now to prove to them? I got plenty of evidence that you have disqualified yourself from executing perfect justice to a perfect law, because you're far from perfect yourself. Again, he wouldn't need to spell it all out. Nor do I think would he want to. Because the interesting thing about these two moments of stooping and writing, they sound very similar, but I do think the second time was very different from the first. See, the first time was to take all the eyes off of the woman. The second time, it took the eyes off of her accusers, because it allowed them to accuse themselves instead of being accused by Jesus. You see, if it were me, because this is such an amazing mic drop moment, they thought they had him trapped. Either option is going to destroy him. We can condemn him in the sight of people. It's going to be amazing. And when he realizes the way to split the middle on this is to honor both, we're going to see that in just a moment. But when he comes up with his escape, fine. If you want to honor the law of Moses, I'm going to make you honor it yourself. I'm going to push you. I'm going to put you in the same trap. This is good. We'll just switch spots. And I'll make you pass judgment. I'll force the question right back on its askers. And will you be just as you claim to honor the justice of the law of Moses? Do you want blood on your hands? Do you want to execute the penalty? And just in case you're bloodthirsty and you would, let me make sure that you're included in this verdict, not just as executioner, but as guilty party. And while we're casting stones, would you cast them at each other? Would you allow others to cast them at you? So let me have you decide then. And if you're perfect as the law that you're trying to defend, then you go ahead and throw the first stone. Now, like I said, if it was me, and I just came up with the best escape ever, and the ultimate in your face, I mean, that's what I would say. I would be staring them down and go, okay, fine. You want to hold her to a perfect law? How you doing it holding yourself to it? Let's see. And if you're perfect enough, then you first cast the stone. Huh? And I'm in their face. But Jesus didn't do that. He calmly made the statement and then was non-confrontational, didn't stare them down for them to just start withering before his perfect gaze. No, he just stooped back down and let his statement settle into their souls. In some ways, he honored the potential goodness even of these wicked men. There's something within them. There's still a glimmer of hope. There's still a conscience, the light of Christ. And Christ trying to shine his light onto that, trusting they're not past feeling yet. And if they can simply judge her through the lens of their own self-judgment, then I hope for her sake that they'll give her a second chance. And I hope for their sakes they'll have awakened within them compassion toward others humility regarding self. I love that Jesus just goes back down to the ground and doodles for a while and allows patience to have her perfect work. He is the master of this moment. And then one last thing worth adding. Think about exactly what he said. He that is without sin among you. Does that describe anyone in that scene? Well, nobody that had brought a rock with them. Nobody who had set this thing up and taken the woman in adultery. Not even the multitude around him that had just come to the temple that early morning to listen and learn. No one qualified. Oh, actually one person did. The one drawing on the ground. The one with his finger in the dirt. He could have held on to his stone. He could have cast it. In fact, he could have cast it in any direction. At the woman taken in adultery, at the Pharisees who took her in that. And yet what does Jesus do with his stone? He drops it to the ground. Unused against anyone, including his own accusers. Now verse 9, they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience. And that's such a powerful phrase. You want to convict, they were after a conviction. I want to convict Jesus more than anything, whether or not he chooses to convict her. Well, there were convictions going on, but it was themselves. Their own conscience. See, they weren't past feeling. The Lord was right. He coaxed that light of Christ into glowing a little brighter, and it convicted themselves. And so they went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. Oh, can we judge other people with an eye to our own imperfections? If we want to condemn others, can we make sure we condemn ourselves first? Because that might soften the sentence we were meaning to pass on other people. Can we, in fact, borrowing more from this language, to see only Jesus? Can we judge with only him in mind? Not what other people are going to think? Or even what we've done. It's interesting because sometimes if we don't think of ourselves, we come down too harshly. But sometimes if we do think of ourselves, we come down too leniently. It's like, I really want to be merciful to them in hopes that they'd be merciful back to me. So it's like, I'll turn a blind eye on you if you'll turn a blind eye on me. Jesus can't err on either side, right? He has to balance justice and mercy. But he's the master at doing that. So as we are judging, keep our eyes only on Jesus. See him, not others. Certainly not peer pressure. What does Jesus think about this? How would he respond in this situation? Now, they've all scattered. The woman's still there. Jesus is still there. And in verse 10, when Jesus had lifted up himself, he's finally come up off the ground, and saw none but the woman. And I don't know how long that required, however much time was necessary for the scribes and Pharisees to disperse. But now that it's just the two of them, he said unto her, Woman, which again is milady, a term of respect, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? And she said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. That phrase, neither do I condemn thee, was Jesus dropping his stone. I'm not here to throw it at you, even though I deserve to. But I also need you to understand the second half of my statement. What you did was wrong. We all know that. And the law of Moses does condemn that sin. But I don't condemn you for having committed it, because that would not allow you any time or space to repent of it. Now, repentance is required. or someday the penalty will be forthcoming. You must go and sin no more. And sin it was that you committed. I cannot condone what you did, but neither will I condemn you for having done it. You see those scribes and Pharisees that are no longer present. They were trapping me between the rock and the hard place, or soft place in my case. They thought I'd have to pick one or the other, and they were going to condemn me no matter which. But I split the middle and combined them both in a phrase, I proved contraries. And instead of making this a yin or yang, I combined the yin-yang. I brought the two opposites together because either virtue taken to its extreme on its own will become a vice. You see, they were hoping that I would take that justice and push it to the extreme, but then it becomes judgmental, it becomes vindictive, it becomes overly harsh and strict and unrelenting, and nobody can live by that other than me. On the other hand, if I erred on the side of mercy, mercy taken to its extreme becomes permissive. It becomes indulgent. It becomes codependent. I asked a group of students once, what's mercy on steroids? And one girl said, codependence. And I thought, ouch, I think you're right. Where there is no law, and do whatever you want, and there's no crime, there's no punishment, there's no sin, there's no guilt. That's Satan's plan. You see, either virtue, and they're virtues, both of them, but taken to their extremes, become vices. I refer to these as coins that end up getting top heavy and then flipping over, and the heads, which was a virtue, turns into a vice, which is the tails. And the scribes and Pharisees were banking on either virtue becoming a vice, because Jesus would have to pick one at the expense of the other. Instead, he proved contraries and said, let's combine justice and mercy. Instead of erring on the side of justice or erring on the side of mercy, let's not err. And how do you walk that tightrope? By sticking your arms out and trying to balance. You see, to walk the tightrope or the balance beam, you don't get as narrow as the line. You stick your arms out as far as you can. You grasp both extremes and combine them in order to keep your balance. And that's exactly what he did. Let me honor justice. Go and sin no more. Let me honor mercy. Neither do I condemn thee. They wanted me to condemn or condone. I'll do neither. By honoring the virtues of both. It's genius what Jesus is doing here. He is master of this situation from start to finish, and it blows my mind at how good at this he is in every set of contraries that needs to be proven. Law and love. He's the Lord of law and the Lord of love. Truth and tolerance. He exemplifies both. Speaking the truth in love, he's always perfectly balanced between these contraries that need proving. And I, for one, am in awe of Jesus for being able to do just that. You see, what he ended up doing was recognizing the gap between the law of Moses with its command for perfection and the reality of people's lived lives, and that gap that's between them. We all fall short. Our behavior always falls short of our belief. And there's things I know I shouldn't do that I do, or know I should be doing and I'm not doing them. And that gap is filled with guilt, which nobody wants to feel. So what do? I taught this years ago when we were talking about Abinadi and the priests of Noah. Because both Abinadi and those wicked priests were trying to eliminate the guilt gap. They just had different ways of doing it. The priests of Noah said, let's bring down the law and eliminate it. Let's bring down beliefs to the level of our behavior. And then, hey, we're not falling short. There's no standard to fall short from. There's relativism for you. There's no established standard or law to keep. Do whatever you want and call it good. You don't have to feel guilty. How's that for publishing peace, Abinadi? Abinadi's like, yeah, that way doesn't work. Because eventually reality is going to pop back up. I call it the the Jack in the Box, and dun 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 dun. As soon as the Spirit returns to let you know things as they really are, then yikes, the reality pops back up and you're back into the guilt gap, feeling horrible about your sins because you know they're sinful. So what does Abinadi say? I like your goal, brethren. I'm a publisher of peace myself, but you can't bring down beliefs. You can only bring up behaviors. That's called repentance. And the Son of God came to earth to suffer for our sins, to give us the chance to do just that. You see, the beauty of the atonement is it honors the reality of law, and there's no wiggle on that. But it also honors the reality of our fallen nature, and then fills the guilt gap with grace. I am not going to lower the standard, because that gives you no reason to repent. But I'm not going to immediately pull you up to prove your lack of compliance with it, because then you don't have any space or time to repent. Instead, I'll allow those two to remain in tension, the ideal and the real, and just hold them in place. Infuse that gap with grace, which gives you time to repent of your sins and grow up in God. I honor the law, but I also honor those who can't quite live it yet. My grace is sufficient if you'll come unto me. I'll allow those weak things to be made strong. I'll help you elevate your behaviors until they come into line with your beliefs. That's the beauty of the atonement of Christ. And that's what he allows for this woman. In fact, there's a magnificent Joseph Smith translation that gives us one last aftermath insight. The JST of John 8, verse 11, and the woman glorified God from that hour and believed on his name. He gave her space. He filled the guilt gap with grace. And she took it and changed. She realized that she had fallen short of the divine standard. But rather than drag down the standard, she allowed Christ to pick her up. From that moment forward, she began to believe on his name. Sometimes if you compare this woman to that triple N sinner that we met before, right? To her, what did Jesus say? Thy sins are forgiven thee. Well, if he's that merciful, why didn't he say that to this woman taken in adultery? Well, he couldn't. He couldn't forgive her sins. She hadn't had time to repent of them. She had just been caught in the very act and then thrown at his feet in the wee hours of the morning. But knowing that, Jesus carved out space. He dropped the rocks, made sure everybody else dropped theirs too. Please disperse. There's nothing to see here. Give her room. Not just to preserve her dignity, but give her room to repent, to restore that dignity. And that's exactly what she does. She glorifies God not for condoning her sin, but glorifies him for allowing her to repent of that sin and change as a result. Like I said, this is the foundational illustration of proving contraries, which to me is the principle of the gospel that I have found perhaps more explanatory power in than any other. I'm constantly trying to look for both and opportunities instead of either or dichotomies, and to balance justice and mercy, faith and works, exclusivity and inclusivity, love and law, truth and tolerance, male and female, individuality and community. There's an unending list of opposite attributes that only stay virtues when they are combined together. Both of them acting as anchors on the other so they don't devolve into vices. Fascinating, fascinating things. I love this. In its aftermath, because this is just the beginning of chapter 8. But in the immediate aftermath, notice what Jesus says in verse 12. Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. This woman had committed her sin in the dark. And tragically, the scribes and Pharisees were trying to shine not light upon it, but additional darkness. Keep it in the dark. Make it even worse rather than help it get better. But Jesus instead shines the light on everything and everyone, including the things within me that I need to repent of. Yes, I'm convicted by my own conscience. But the light of the world fills my gap with grace too, and helps me see the darkness within me and see the way to turn it into light. By the way, this grows out of the Feast of Tabernacles as well. I mentioned the role of water from the pool of Siloam, right? And Jesus is the living water, and from his belly, his womb, living water will flow. But it's also a festival that light plays a large part. In fact, there were 4 candelabras set up at the Temple Mount. I mean, picture a menorah on steroids, okay? We're talking 50 cubits high, 75 feet. Imagine like a 7.5-story candlestick that is illuminating the entire Temple Mount during the Feast of Tabernacles. It would be light everywhere. I mean, a city set on a hill cannot be hid, well, especially when the spotlights are on. The light of the world, that's exactly what Jerusalem became during this week of celebration. And here's Jesus, not only the living water, but also the light of the world. Only he can tower above 50-cubit candle stands. But there he is towering. Now, the Pharisees won't stand for that. Have they come back after licking their wounds? Are these others? Has some time passed? Is this later in the day? I don't know all the details. But in verse 13, we get back to the kind of oppositionality we saw in chapter 7, where Jesus would say something and they would throw something back in his face. Well, here they do it. Verse 13, the Pharisees therefore said unto him, thou bearest record of thyself. Thy record is not true. This is circular reasoning. You claim to be something, but you're the only one who claims it. I don't have to take your word for it. But Jesus answered and said unto them, well, though I bear record of myself, yet my record is true, for I know whence I came and whither I go. I know my identity, because I know my origin. I know my purpose. I know who I am because I know whose I am and where I'm from and where I'm going and why I'm here. Those are the great golden questions, right? And Jesus knew the answer to them all. But then he adds, but ye cannot tell whence I come, whether it's Bethlehem or Galilee or earth or heaven. And you can't tell whither I go, because you think I'm going one place, I'm going somewhere else. Ye judge after the flesh, is what he says. That's back to appearances. It's back to tradition. It's back to assumptions. And that's how you judge. Well, I don't judge that way. I judge no man, at least not the way you do. And yet if I judge, since ultimately he will pass final judgment, my judgment is true, for I am not alone, but I and the Father that sent me. Jesus doesn't need backup to know who he is, but he does have it. The Father himself said so at the baptism, at the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus knows who he is. The Father knows who Jesus is. And those that know Jesus or know the Father know the identity of Christ as well. Verse 17, he then adds, it is also written in your law that the testimony of 2 men is true. Let's invoke the law of witnesses, shall we? I am one that bear witness of myself, as you just charged me. But the Father, there's number 2, the Father that sent me beareth witness of me. Now that's the second time he's done this. Back in John chapter 5, he said the same thing. He invoked the law of witnesses. They were saying, you're the only one that backs you up. And Jesus said, I got all kinds of witnesses. Me, John the Baptist, the works I've performed. How about the ultimate one? The Father himself. The all-knowing God knows who I am and bears witness of me. And here's the second time he's done it, invoking the Father in terms of the law of witnesses, where at least 2 or 3 are required. I love sharing these verses to those Trinitarian friends of mine that say, no, Father and Son are identical. They're the same being. They said, that kind of gets in the way of law of witnesses, doesn't it? They're accusing Jesus of just being kind of almost self-protective, or as they would say, self-deceptive. And if the Father and the Son are still the same self, then he's still down to a witness of one. No, these are separate beings. And by Jesus invoking the separateness of the Father as an additional outside witness, yes, this is a separate being then. Now the people won't stand for that. So verse 19, then said they unto him, well, where is thy Father? And Jesus answered, ye neither know me nor my Father. Because if ye had known me, ye should have known my Father also. This is like father, like son, after all, right? And then John adds this detail to give us a geographic location. These words spake Jesus in the treasury, as he taught in the temple, and no man laid hands on him, for his hour was not yet come. I mean, they want to throw stones, but they can't. They're convicted by their own conscience. But man, they want to convict him. Interesting, it's at the treasury in the temple, where people are making their offerings. Maybe a widow now and then with a mite. What are you bringing to offer Jesus? Do you know who he is? Do you see Father and Son in perfect resemblance in him? Or maybe another thing on treasury is, the parable of the householder that had a treasury, and out of that treasury he brought forth treasures both old and new. Well, Jesus is bringing things out in this sermon, both old and new, that are shocking people. Either way, Jesus is boldly declaring his identity. No more messianic secret. I and my Father, okay? I know who I am. He knows who I am. Do you know who I am? Despite all of their denials, he's getting bolder and bolder in this self-declaration. In fact, it gets even bolder here. Verse 21, then said Jesus again unto them, I go my way, and ye shall seek me. This is a repeat of what we saw back in chapter 7. But ye shall die in your sins. Whither I go, ye cannot come. So he's clarifying what he had said earlier. You're going to seek, and you're not going to be able to find. I'm going to go, and you're not going to be able to follow, because I'm going to be going to God, and you're going somewhere else. You're going to die in your sins. Now the Jews don't understand it, or at least don't want to, and so they said, will he kill himself? Because he saith, whither I go ye cannot come? Now that seems like it's out of left field. What? Will he kill himself? Why suicide? No, he's talking about celestial glory. But they're not that far off when they talk about death, because that's what they want. They don't want him to kill himself, but they do want to kill him, or at least have the officers do their dirty work. Well, what's he gonna say about this? How's he going to respond? Verse 23, he said unto them, ye are from beneath, I am from above. Never the twain shall meet. Ye are of this world, I am not of this world. This is an echo of what he said about his half-brothers early on in chapter 7. The world doesn't hate you because you don't hate the world. The world hates me because I hate it and I call it out. I'm not of this world. You are. I said therefore unto you that ye shall die in your sins, for if ye believe not that I am he, ye shall die in your sins. After all, the only way to be freed from those sins is to believe in the Savior, and you don't. You don't recognize him standing before you. Verse 25, then said they unto him, who art thou? They're finally realizing and admitting that they don't really know. All these assumptions about him, it's not adding up. Who is this guy? How dare he throw down such language against us? What is he talking about? Now Jesus saith unto them, even the same that I said unto you from the beginning. So let me answer your question. Who am I? I've been telling you this all along. Why won't you believe me? Instead, no, I'm just bearing testimony of myself. No, I'm answering your question. Who am I? I'm the Son of God. I'm the Messiah. I'm the Savior of the world. He says, I have many things to say and to judge of you. But let's not worry about that. He said, he that sent me is true. And I speak to the world those things which I have heard of him. Now they still don't get it. They understood not that he spake to them of the Father. Really? You don't? Well, I guess if it's spoken, they can't hear the capital F on the word. For us reading it, it's the capital Father, the Father of us all, the literal Father of this literal Son of God. Do you see the connection he's making and presenting before them his true identity? In verse 28, then said Jesus unto them, when ye have lifted up the Son of Man. And how's that for a stark foreshadowing of the crucifixion? I know what you're trying to do. I know that you're trying to kill me. I know how you're going to do it. I know through whom you will do it. When you lift me up, then shall ye know that I am he. It's as if he's saying the uniqueness of my death will finally bear witness to the uniqueness of my life. When I die, I think about the centurion. Surely this man is the Son of God. You'll know once it's too late to exercise faith. You'll know that I am he. Not only that, you'll know that I do nothing of myself, but as my Father hath taught me, I speak these things. And he that sent me is with me. The Father hath not left me alone, for I do always those things that please him. And as he spake these words, many believed on him. Some of the multitudes are finally beginning to get it. They're beginning to see the light of the world, illuminating these realities of his identity. I can't help but worry, though, what Jesus just said there in the context of the crucifixion. When I am lifted up, you'll finally know, and you'll know that I only do the things the Father has commanded me. He'll say this in 3 Nephi 27, that the gospel was doing the will of God. And what was God's will? That I be lifted up upon the cross. I did that. I suffered his will in all things. But when he says, my Father hath not left me alone, that makes me think of the crucifixion too. When the Son offered those soul-rending words to the Father, why hast thou forsaken me? Why have you left me alone? When now of all times I am doing that which pleaseth thee. There is a brutal irony in this passage. And as Elder Maxwell said, irony is the hard crust on the bread of adversity. It was hard enough to be crucified. It was hard enough to have the presence of God withdraw. But the irony of that abandonment, not only when I need him most, but when I'm pleasing him best, he wasn't with me. Now, verse 31, then said Jesus to those Jews which believed on him, since some of them had converted through his testimony. He says to them, if ye continue in my word. So not just receive it, but continue in it. This is endure to the end. No matter, even when the going gets rough, because it's going to get rough for him and it's going to get rough for them too. So will you continue? If you do, then are ye my disciples indeed. Instead of just being summer soldiers or sunshine patriots, instead of being daylight disciples, no, will you follow me into the dark? Will you follow me into death? Will you continue in my word? Then you're a real disciple. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now Jesus is that truth. He's the way, the truth, and the life. He will set them free. Real freedom from their sins, from their sorrows, from their trials, from their troubles. He'll free us all. The believers would wrap their hearts around that promise, but the unbelievers, in verse 33, they answered him, we are Abraham's seed, and we're never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, ye shall be made free? You understand what they're saying? They're throwing that comment right back in his face, that beautiful phrase that we all seem to have memorized, that the truth will make you free. They throw it back and say, we don't need your freedom. We've always been free. We're the seed of Abraham. We've never been in bondage to anyone else. Which I can't help but eye roll or facepalm and go, are you that clueless and that forgetful? You seed of Abraham have never been in bondage to any man? What about 400 years of bondage in Egypt? And then freed by Moses 1.0, and here you are standing before Moses 2.0, but then freed only to get yourself back into bondage to the Assyrians, to the Babylonians, to the Persians in a way, to the Greeks definitely, the Seleucids, the Ptolemies. How about Rome, anyone? Look around. And you have evidence of your captivity all around you. Never been in bondage to any man? You're in bondage right now. And not just to Rome. You're in bondage to sin and self-deception. You are trapped by your own pride. You won't humble yourself enough to accept your invitation to repent. Oh, you seed of Abraham, the fruit has fallen so far from the tree. So Jesus answers them in verse 34, Verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin. That's the bondage I'm really getting at. And that's the freedom I'm offering you all. He says, the servant abideth not in the house forever, but the Son abideth ever. So if the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed. I know that ye are Abraham's seed. But ye seek to kill me, because my word hath no place in you. Again, he gets straight back in their face, as bold as he was back in chapter 7. Because they haven't changed their tune, even though, well, they haven't changed their goal, even though they've changed their tune. You're still trying to kill me. And your earlier attempts have all failed. Your sending of officers came back to bite you. You're using this poor woman as a pawn. I was able to escape that one unscathed, and so was she, thankfully. But you're still trying to kill me, you seed of Abraham. Talk about the ultimate affront to them. Being told, yes, you're the seed of Abraham, and there's no family resemblance at all. You see, verse 38, he gets more and more bold here. I speak that which I have seen with my Father, capital F as usual. On the other hand, ye do that which ye have seen with your father. And that's a lowercase f. But it's even worse than that. They answered and said unto him, Abraham is our father. They keep going back to that. Earlier in chapter 7, it was all about Moses, Moses, Moses. And here, it's Abraham, Abraham, Abraham. Abraham is our father. And then Jesus saith unto them, oh yeah? If ye were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham. There's a family business to be the seed of Abraham. You're not doing it. There's a family resemblance with Abraham. You don't have it. Like father, like son, I am the express image of the Father. You are nothing like your father Abraham. He says, now ye seek to kill me, a man that hath told you the truth, which I have heard of God, and this did not Abraham. Ye do the deeds of your father. And what did he mean by that? Now, he's trying to explain, but it seems like they interrupt in that moment. How dare you? How dare you compare us to Abraham? We're his seed. And he's like, no, you're nothing like him. Nothing like him at all. You're more like a different father. And they pause right there. They interrupt, verse 41. They said unto him, we be not born of fornication. In other words, we're the true seed of Abraham. We're not half-breeds like those Samaritans up north. I even wonder, born of fornication, is this a subtle or not so subtle jab at Jesus' questionable birth? Oh, we know you're half-brothers. And we know the difference in the family tree. So we're not the ones born of fornication here. We have one Father. And they capitalized the F for that one. Even God. So beyond being seed of Abraham, we're children of God. Now Jesus responds, if God were your Father, ye would love me. For I proceeded forth and came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. In other words, if you really were sons and daughters of God, then you would accept me as your spiritual sibling, as your elder brother, as the greatest of all the sons of God myself. But he says, why do ye not understand my speech? Let me answer my own question. Even because ye cannot hear my word. And the JST is even more interesting. Even because ye cannot bear my word. You can't handle it. It's too heavy for you. Too much of a burden. Too hard to hold. Oh, you children of God. How can you not recognize the Son of God right before you? This is such a fascinating conversation. It's more than a conversation. It seems to be heated. It's a debate. And they will not accept the word before them. They cannot handle that he is the Son of God. But remember, as he started in that previous verse, you do the deeds of your father. And they're like, no, what are you talking about? We're children of God. We're children of Abraham. Well, let me finish the thought, okay? Since you're trying to kill me, I might as well give you a reason to do it. Okay? Verse 44, ye are of your father the devil. Let me just spell it out. Let me make it as clear as I possibly can. And the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he's a liar and the father of it. And if he's the father of lies and he's your father, I guess that makes lies of all of you. You liars, you cannot accept the truth. You cannot recognize the truth when the truth is standing before you, when the truth is here to set you free. No wonder you're in bondage to sin and to stupidity. No wonder you're captive to your own natural man. Because there's a family resemblance you've chosen. And it wasn't the family resemblance of seed of Abraham. It certainly wasn't the family resemblance of children of God. I see in you not light but darkness. And the prince of darkness is the person you've crowned king. There have been times where I've tried to explain this concept by quoting one of my favorite lines from one of my favorite movies. Remember the Titans. At one point, when the coach gets in the face of a few of his athletes and is trying to confirm to them his own authority. So he gets right up in their face and he asks the question, who's your daddy? And they're like, huh? And he's basically saying, I'm your daddy. Forget mom and dad at home. I own you now. You belong to me. And as long as you're on my team, you're going to play by my rules because I'm your daddy. And as I've talked to students about this, I've asked them, theologically, that's a good question. Who's your daddy? How would you respond? Two of their answers come easily. First, well, I'm a child of God, so who's my daddy? I have a father in heaven. In fact, I have a mother in heaven as well, and my parents in heaven are the parents of my spirit, through a process known as spiritual birth. We don't understand the mechanics, but that's okay. Now, second round, do you have another set of parents? Let me ask you now, what you're born now, and now who's your daddy? And the students always know that one too. Well, I have an earthly father and an earthly mother. Okay, great. What are they the parents of? Well, my physical body. Good. Through what process? Physical birth. Awesome. So we now have two sets of parents, and they have given us a spirit and a body through spiritual birth and physical birth. I said, okay, now this is where the plot thickens. You get to pick a third set of parents. Who's your daddy now? Now, as I've asked my students, who's the set of parents you can pick, some of them look at me really confused and they're like, your in-laws? Like, who's your daddy? My father-in-law? I'm like, no, you don't pick them. Don't get me wrong, I love my father-in-law, but I didn't pick him. I picked his daughter. And he came in on the package deal, and I'm grateful for that, okay? But I didn't choose, I chose my spouse. So no, that doesn't count. Who's your daddy? By choice. And when it finally dawns on them, they realize, oh, my daddy is Jesus if I choose him. Now some push back and go, no, Jesus is our elder brother, he's not our daddy. But think about what King Benjamin says. No, when you take on the covenant, you become children of Christ. He spiritually begets you as his sons and daughters. Now, that's a powerful imagery. Jesus as my Father? Well, because I've taken his name upon me. Oh. Yeah, I have his image engraven in my countenance. Ah, there's family resemblance. This is starting to make sense. Well, and if Jesus is your daddy of the covenant, then who's your mama? Since fathers always have mothers alongside. So, thank you, Paul, for clarifying this one so we don't have to speculate. Husbands, love your wives even as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Nice. So if Christ is my father, then the church is my mother. They're the parents of my covenant. Oh, yeah. And what's the process? It's spiritual rebirth. It's always a birth that goes along with this, right? And so, yes, Christ is the father of my covenant. He presides and provides and protects. The church is the mother of my covenant. She nurtures me in the faith. It's an amazing set of parents that we're choosing. But like I said, we're choosing. And if we don't choose Jesus, then what's our default choice? What's the other alternative? Well, Jesus made that abundantly, brutally clear to these Pharisees. Ye, since you haven't chosen me, are of your father, the devil. Yikes. That's our other option. If I don't choose Jesus as my father, then I've allowed Satan to choose me as his son or daughter. He has sealed me his. That's a phrase from the Book of Mormon. So even Satan believes in the eternal family. It's not a process of birth. It's the process of death, spiritual death. And he brings sin into our lives instead of salvation. He's even married, by the way. If Jesus married his church, then of course Satan married his too, also known as the great and abominable church, also known as the whore of all the earth. Figures Satan would marry a prostitute, someone unfaithful to him, even as he is unfaithful to us. But also, what's another name for the great and abominable church? What's another name for the great and spacious building? What's another name for the whore of all the earth? It's the world. Remember, Jesus says, the world doesn't hate you, it hates me. I'm not of the world, you are. Jesus cannot marry the world. He's married to his kingdom. But Satan's married to his. And he, the God of this world, the ruler of the kingdoms of the earth, with all of its wickedness and pride, materialism, vanity. This is Zion versus Babylon. This is the kingdom of God versus the kingdom of the devil. This is a custody battle. And we're the child that gets to choose which parents we'll end up being with. Ironically, because Satan knows that nobody's going to choose him over Jesus, he usually hides behind his wife and tries to hide Jesus behind his wife and present the mothers as the option. Satan doesn't want to ask, who's your daddy? Because nobody's going to choose him. He wants to say, who's your mama? In fact, which mother would you prefer? And the thought of, this is mother, worldly mother, this is the good life. It's like, she'll let me do anything I want. I can have Skittles for breakfast. She doesn't care. Well, that's the problem. She doesn't care. The other mother, the church, does care. And she has commandments and asks things of us. So does her husband, Jesus. But he also fills the gap with grace and allows us to grow up in him. You understand the analogy I'm trying to present? Jesus presents it here so powerfully. Take your choice. Jesus or Lucifer. Jehovah or Satan. Zion or Babylon. When he says he was a murderer from the beginning, what's Jesus instead? He is the life of the world. When he says that he abode not in the truth, he's a liar from the beginning. And what's Jesus? He is the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Jesus is trying to make this as clear as he possibly can. Choose you this day whom you will serve. Choose you this day whom you will choose as your parents. But choose wisely. He then says in verse 45, and because I tell you the truth, as opposed to the liar that you're choosing yourself, ye believe me not. And no surprise there. Remember what Nephi says to Laman and Lemuel? The wicked take the truth to be hard, for it cutteth them to the very center. Well, these are cutting words. You're of your father the devil? Hello. Well, I'm telling you the truth. I know it hurts. No wonder you don't believe me. But then again, he adds, which of you convinceth me of sin? So have I done anything wrong? Anything worthy of condemnation? Why are you trying to kill me then? He says, if I say the truth, why do you not believe me? Well, because denying or ignoring that truth is more convenient. That's why. Because it's less threatening to our power. That's why. It's less disruptive to the status quo. I can still be in charge and rule over other people here in Jerusalem. And oh, you didn't want me to answer that out loud, did you? That's why we don't believe you. Jesus then says, he that is of God heareth God's words. And the JST clarifies, he that is of God receiveth God's words. They're open to it, want to receive them, bring them in, internalize them. Ye therefore hear them not. JST, you receive them not. And why? Because you're not of God. If you really were from God, like you claim, you would believe his words. In fact, you would believe his word, capital W, made flesh. But you don't. So in verse 48, then answered the Jews and said unto him, say we not well that thou art a Samaritan and hast a devil? There it is again. They have no real response for what he's just accused them of. So what do? They descend to character assassination. This is nothing more than an ad hominem attack. We saw them do that with Nicodemus. Like, what are you talking about? What, are you from Galilee? We saw that before, of just dismiss it all and go, yo, you're the devil and we don't have to listen to you. And here they're saying that to Jesus. You're just a Samaritan. I mean, you hang out with them often enough. They're probably contagious. Worse than that, you have a devil. This is so childish. Jesus has given them some deep theology about which side of the family tree they're choosing. You are of your father the devil, and here's all the reasons why. And they just go, well, I'm rubber and you're glue, and bounces off me and sticks to you. It's like, you're of the devil. Oh, you're of the devil. Really? Is that, we're just now descending to that kind of name calling and neener? Wow. Jesus answers, I have not a devil, but I honor my Father, and ye do dishonor me. And I seek not mine own glory. There is one that seeketh and judgeth. And that's this same Father I keep referring to. I'm not doing this for me. I'm not seeking self-aggrandizement. I'm doing this for God. I've got his back. And he's got mine. I'm his son after all. So if you will not seek truth and judge righteousness, beware that the day will come when God will seek you and judge you for your unrighteousness. Verse 51, verily, verily, I say unto you, if a man keep my saying, he shall never see death. He's just keep going on, trying to teach his true doctrine. Here's the life of the world standing before them. You will have life. You'll never see death. This is living water. This is bread of life. This is drink and never thirst, and eat and never hunger. Live and never die. And then these Jews, like normal, take it way too literally, and they say to him, well, now we know that thou hast a devil, because Abraham is dead, and the prophets, and thou sayest, if a man keep my saying, he shall never taste of death. Are you crazy? Or as they really ask, art thou greater than our father Abraham, which is dead, and the prophets are dead? Who makest thou thyself? Interesting question at the end. Who do you claim to be? Who are you making yourself out to be? What are you talking about? Abraham, dead. Moses, dead. All the great prophets of the past. And now you're saying if people will believe in you, they'll never die? You're insane. In some ways, this is a lot like the woman at the well before her conversion, before she realized who she's speaking to. When she kind of throws down in Jesus' face and says, what, are you greater than our father Jacob, who dug this well? You can give us something more than he could? Whatever. Well, here they're even taking it up a few generations. What, are you better than Abraham? Whatever. You're nothing and no one. And we will stick with Abraham, thank you very much. And we'll stick with Moses and his strict law, thank you very much. We are not going to go with you. Well, Jesus responds in verse 54. He answered, if I honor myself, my honor is nothing. Because again, that would be circular. That is just me bearing witness of me. I'm not trying to do this for myself. It is my Father that honoreth me, of whom ye say that he is your God. Now, were you serious about that? Is the proof in the pudding? Can I judge you by your fruits? Are you truly of God? Because if you were, you would accept me as the Son of God. So I don't think I can trust that you really are of him. This is what Jesus says next. Yet ye have not known him, but I know him. And if I should say I know him not, I shall be a liar, like unto you. Yikes. But I know him and keep his saying. You see, in some ways it would have been easier for Jesus just to pretend not to know God and take the easy path instead of the path of pain that would lead to Calvary. No, I am known of God and I know God. This is like Father, like Son. I will do his work and I'll do his will and I'll do it for his glory because I know him. You don't. If you say you do and yet you act this way, then you're lying and there's no truth within you. But back to Abraham, since you did mention him. Verse 56, your father Abraham, he rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. In fact, think back to Abraham in the Old Testament, standing very near where Jesus was standing at this moment, ready to sacrifice his son, Isaac. And yet, what happened? An angel was sent to hold him back. What were the words of reassurance that Abraham had given Isaac? God will provide himself a lamb. There was a ram in the thicket. This is the Lamb of God himself, soon to be caught in a thicket, ready to give himself for all the posterity of Abraham, not just Isaac. When Abraham knew that I would come to save his seed, he rejoiced in me. Jesus is saying, you love Abraham, well, Abraham loved me, so you should love me too. But their response, because there's back and forth, it's tit for tat, and what do they say next? Then said the Jews unto him, thou art not yet 50 years old, and hast thou seen Abraham? So once again, getting way too literal on this. Like, you're not even pushing 50 yet, and Abraham was thousands of years ago. You're insane. But Jesus has a response even to that, and it's mind-blowing. Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you. So let me slow this down. Truly, truly, let me make a statement of fact. Before Abraham was, I am. Oh, this has nothing to do with physical years and physical sight. But spiritually speaking, we're talking about spiritual precedent and spiritual preeminence that long before Abraham existed, I did. Now here's Jesus' premortality. Here's Jesus as God of Israel, as Jehovah. This is how I knew Abraham. And you're no Abraham, you Jews of my day. But it's even more than that. It's more than just I preceded Abraham as the premortal Christ. But I communed with Abraham as the God of Israel. Because you remember when Moses was at the burning bush and he wondered, what do I call you? How do I introduce you to my people? What's the Lord's response? I am that I am. I exist, and I cause to exist. I be, and I call into being. I am, that's it. And what's amazing about this passage, and it's such fighting words for the Jewish audience that hears it, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I've existed even longer than Abraham, but it's another thing to use that phrase, that word, I am. Because that's the name of God, and you're not allowed to take the name of God in vain. You can't say this Jews, when they see it on the page, they won't even say the words. They'll just say Adonai, meaning Lord instead. In the King James Version, we'll just capitalize all the letters in Lord to just set it apart so everybody knows, don't actually say the actual word, because no one's allowed to say it. And Jesus just did. And not just to say it, but to claim it as his own. I mean, in some ways, just move the comma and it becomes more clear what Jesus is really hinting at here. And it's more than a hint. It's a bold declaration. Not just before Abraham was, I am. How about this? Before Abraham, comma, was I am. I am the God of Israel. And I am that I am. Yes, he rejoiced to see my day. My day has been never ending. Here I'm just standing among you in the flesh. But I am that God of Israel. Now, like I said, this is shocking. This is straight up blasphemy. You don't say these words. And in verse 59, then took they up stones to cast at him. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. And the chapter ends. Talk about a cliffhanger. We started chapter 8 with stones in hand, ready to throw at an adulterous woman who was guilty. We end the chapter with more stones in the hand. This time they're ready to throw it at Innocence himself because of his supposed blasphemy. How dare you say that name? And even more scandalous, how dare you claim it as your own? It's interesting to see what Jesus goes through in this moment. Also the fact that he just passes through, undetained, unaccosted, unattacked. Reminds me of that time when he, again, claims to be the Messiah at the synagogue in Nazareth. And they take him to the edge of town to throw him headlong over a cliff. And what's he do? No, just passes through the midst of them. And they can't stop him. Evidently something similar is happening here. But again, the context is fascinating. Temple Mount. Jesus speaking to the leaders of the Jews, letting them know who he really is. And how will they respond? How will we respond when he calls us out and cries repentance? When he reveals himself to us in all of his glory. High Christology? Oh, he's claiming it. I am the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. I'm the God of Moses. I am the Lord of the universe. Come unto me. See me for who I am. Accept me. Or will we take up stones to throw at the rock of Israel? This moment, if we just paused it here with the chance to reflect on who stands before us, the light of the world, the living water, the bread of life, whom do ye say that the Son of Man is? Well, thou art the Christ. Is that our testimony? Is that the word that we will bear?